Welcome back to Season 8 of the ReidConnect-Ed podcast, co-hosted by myself, licensed psychologist Dr. Gerald Reid, and my sister, educational therapist Alexis Reid.
What does it mean to prepare young people to begin their lives outside of high school? Today, we're diving into a topic that every young person will navigate, but one that often does not get enough honest conversation: what it really means to take ownership of your sexual, physical, and mental health after high school. Graduation doesn't just mark the end of classes. It marks the beginning of greater independence. Whether you're heading to college, entering the workforce, taking a gap year, joining the military, or exploring another path, you'll suddenly find yourself making decisions about your health with much less guidance than you may be used to. Recognizing changes in your body or mental health, building healthier relationships, understanding consent, practicing safe sex, and knowing when and how to ask for help are all skills that become part of adult life. Unfortunately, many of these topics receive only limited attention in high school, leaving young adults to piece together information from friends, social media, or the internet. Today, we're talking about how to fill those gaps with accurate information, practical strategies, and the confidence to advocate for yourself. Our goal isn't to have all the answers for every situation. It's to encourage curiosity, reduce stigma, and remind you that taking care of your health isn't something you master overnight. It's a lifelong skill that grows with knowledge, self-awareness, and support. Whether you're a student preparing for your next chapter, a parent helping your child become more independent, or an educator supporting this transition, we hope today's conversation gives you practical tools and a fresh perspective on what it means to build a healthy, informed, and empowered adulthood. Today, we're joined by two incredible experts who also happen to be siblings to talk with us about how we can prepare young people to make good choices about their physical, sexual, and mental health. We all believe that evidence-based guidance is the real foundation of young adulthood or college readiness. Physical health and sexual safety, sleep and daily rhythms, mental health and emotional regulation, and the quality of the parent-child relationship. Instead of checklists and scare tactics, we'll discuss how to make a mindset shift from monitoring and control towards curiosity, partnership, and using the pre-college years as a practice ground for agency, well-being, and sustainable success. Our guests today are sisters, Johanna Fierman Snyder and Abby Fierman. Johanna Fierman Snyder is a certified child sleep consultant and former educator with 15 years of classroom experience, including as a first and fourth grade teacher and learning specialist in New York City. Certified through the Family Sleep Institute, Johanna combines her educational background with science-backed personalized sleep coaching to help families thrive. A member of the International Association of Child Sleep Consultants with additional training in SIDS risk reduction and lactation management, she empowers parents with the tools and confidence to support their child's healthy, restorative sleep. Johanna holds a BA from Bates College and an MA in Curriculum and Teaching from Teachers College at Columbia University. Abby Fierman is a women's health nurse practitioner and sexual assault nurse examiner with over 20 years of experience in sexual health. Recognizing that traditional healthcare models often lack the time for comprehensive education and that young people often turn to unreliable social media sources, Abby founded The Bare Facts. Her mission is to partner with medical providers to offer teens and young adults the essential education, open communication, and compassionate care needed to make informed decisions about their sexual health. Abby is dedicated to filling the critical gaps in sexual health literacy, empowering young people of all identities to navigate their development with confidence. We are so glad you both are here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here.
So I'm just going to start this conversation in saying I wish we had more guidance when we were younger to navigate so many challenges and different transitions in life. And like just the conversation about sexual health, at least when I was younger, never happened. Like it would happen in little blips or, you know, kids that might have heard something from their older siblings, but it never really became, you know, a process in an open conversation that ever felt comfortable or reliable in the information that was being communicated. So I'm so glad that we get to have this conversation and bring it to light. And for our audience who might not have been a part of it, we had the great privilege of coming together in early June of this year to do a workshop to talk about all of the things that we're going to discuss here today, and especially thinking about the transition out of high school, thinking about our adolescent young people that are really stepping into their adulthood and their independence and maybe not always feeling comfortable or ready for it. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation.
And this is a true siblings conversation.
What's less comfortable than talking about sex with your sibling?
It's happening in real time.
Let's go.
Twice.
So I want you guys to have an opportunity to kind of just talk a little bit about your journey, how you got to doing this work. I know the bio kind of encompasses, the highlights of what led you here, but I wonder if you can share a little bit about your journey and the work that you've done.
Sure. So thank you for that beautiful introduction. As Alexis said, I am a women's health nurse practitioner, and I have worked for about 20 years in the sexual space, both as a clinician in a OBGYN traditional office and as a sexual assault nurse examiner in the state of Massachusetts. And it's given me a lot of time to see what works and maybe what doesn't work so well in our healthcare system. And I've had the opportunity to talk to both women and men and boys across the sort of, say, early teens to even up to their 30s and 40s through my experience about their experience, about their education. And I'm realizing how much is lacking. When I was a provider, it was always really frustrating that I could have a 15-minute visit to talk about fill in the blank. Maybe it was birth control. Maybe it was their periods. Maybe it was consent or whatever the topic was. It was never enough time. And as a provider, that was really frustrating to me. And I felt like I wasn't giving my patients the best care possible because it was rushing them out the door because I had 5 more patients waiting to be seen that day. And that didn't feel fair to anyone. So after I left the practice, I had some time to think, and I started actually getting calls from friends saying, hey, my daughter is thinking about using birth control. Hey, my son has some questions. Would you be willing to talk to them? And I started to talk to them, and it was really fun. And of course, I just did it for free because I loved it. And then my sister, who already was a small business owner, said, why don't you do this? You could make this a business. You could do this. And so it took about a year to really figure it out. And it's still a work in progress. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly clients, adolescents, their parents want. But it's coming together, and I'm trying to offer kids, either in a small group or one-on-one space, a safe place to talk about all of these things. So when they do go to their provider's office and maybe they do want birth control, they really have a better understanding of how their body works, what works best for them, what would be most beneficial for them in the time of life that they're in.
So beautifully said. We're so glad that you're doing this work and making the transition into being able to go a little bit deeper with some of these conversations and the psychoeducation around like what actually is going on in people's bodies and what they may or may not need. Joe?
Sure, I can follow that. I have lots of things to add onto why it's a great business, but I'll first introduce myself. So thanks for having us. We're very excited to be here. I, as you said, was a teacher for a long time and loved it. I think, growing up, I always wanted to be a teacher, and that's where kind of my path took me, and I loved it. And then when I had my oldest son, I felt pretty alone and exhausted and didn't really know what was happening with sleep. And I didn't have resources. I read a lot of books, but it wasn't, my pediatrician, as Abby said, I had a 15-minute visit with her. I was trying to get information, but, and then with research, I kind of helped his sleep and got on a path that felt manageable. And I always say my teacher background, I wanted a routine, and that felt more comfortable and safe for me. And so I did a lot of research and learned a lot about sleep and was starting, worked well for us. And like Abby said, similarly, I was giving lots of advice to friends who then started having babies, and I was just doing it from what I had learned. I didn't, I wasn't trained in this area. But fast forward, I was still teaching. Wasn't taking on another full-time career. And then when I stopped teaching, we moved and I was not teaching at my school anymore. I had some time to kind of think about what I wanted to do next. And I wanted to become certified as a sleep consultant and felt like I was giving advice, but I wanted to have the credentials and the background and more knowledge about it before I really went into opening my practice. So I became certified, and now I've been a sleep consultant helping families across the country and internationally. And I work with children 0 to 10 in my one-on-one practice, but I've recently done more work in elementary schools, which was an awesome experience where I, was talking to students up until 8th grade. And then we recently did our webinar about, for older people and teenagers and beyond. And it's great. I could talk about sleep all day. So I'm happy to be here to talk about it.
I'm so excited. And I just want to give a shout out to all of your boys, because the case isn't always that practitioners are really helping to support their kids kind of step into it, because sometimes it feels like you're doing work all the time. But I can attest to the fact that both of your boys, you both have 2 boys, really kind of own the work that you both do in a really beautiful way. I've had conversations with some of them that, they're rating their health and wellness classes that they have at school in comparison to what they know about how they should be taking care of themselves from both a sleep perspective, sexual health understanding, like all of it. And it's really beautiful to hear that it's not just like what you do professionally, it's also what you live. And that's really why I wanted you to come on this podcast and talk about it, because it's just a part of who you both are, and you're so passionate about it. And not only are you just passionate about it, you have done so much research and so much training to get to this point, and your expertise is just incredible. So I'm really glad for folks in the audience to be able to hear more about the work that you all do. And I want to set the stage. This is a open flowing conversation, but maybe we can kind of go back and talk a little bit about what we know about like young people who are maybe in high school, because this is an interesting time. I work a lot with parents, and so do all of you, who are kind of just like winging it sometimes. And I've noticed a little bit around how they sometimes walk on eggshells around their teenagers instead of really like enforcing what they know is helpful from a structure perspective, like you were saying, Joe, or, even just thinking about giving them information to guide what's best for them, because every single person is different, right? Just because we're talking about adolescents doesn't mean every single person is going to have the same needs. But globally, we can think about what is kind of best practices and what are some of the ways in which we know young people are getting information, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what might be more helpful.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the information that's out there, because my clients are scrolling at night and they're up at night if their kid's up at night, and they get a lot of information online and social media. And Abby's clientele also is getting a tremendous amount of information from social media. And there are reliable sources on social media, but there's also sources that maybe we don't want to get information from. And it's hard as a new parent or a parent of a teen or a teen to know which is reliable and which is not, and which is like a trending idea or which is actually like something that is real and backed in science and research.
Just to be clear too, some of those sources on the internet could be like funded to like push a product
Absolutely.
or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you wouldn't know until like later when they begin pitching it. Like they kind of reel you in with some interesting things that might be true in the beginning, and then kind of narrow you into some tunnel of like, okay, now you're going to go purchase this or think a certain way.
And that's not new. That's been happening on TV media for years. If you especially walk down, the aisle of the women's health and hygiene, the number of products that are there that are really unnecessary, but are a product, and they've been told that it's going to make you, quote, better, however you define that. And so I think that you're completely right. And, we all get sucked into these things that are going to get a quick fix or make us better or make us more, quote unquote, normal. And I think that as adults, we can get sucked in. So it's that much easier for kids to see that and think that maybe there's something wrong with them or that they need something. And so I think it's really important that we educate them about being, social media savvy and smart.
I just want to pull it back a minute too, because in my work around executive function, it's about the neurodevelopmental stages, right? We're not just saying that kids are vulnerable or adults are vulnerable. It's literally our frontal lobes aren't necessarily filtering the information to be able to prioritize what's important, because everything feels important, right? Everything feels like it's something we're supposed to have, especially if it's promoted or advertised in a certain way. I'm thinking, as you were describing, like going down an aisle, there's like a million different options. And how do you even know what you need or what's right for you if you haven't been able to explore or ask the right questions to get to what you should invest in as something that's going to help take care of like your most personal parts, right? As a human.
Yeah. And the conversations are important. It's hard to talk to our teenagers, both as parents, but also in a general population. Like, it's hard to get information out of them or to know what they're hearing and to know what information they're getting. And they have short appointments with their primary care providers, and they have like maybe a health class I think my kids had one in 5th grade and one in 7th grade and 8th grade and one in 10th grade, but they're not hitting on topics in an in-depth way. And they also might not be comfortable spaces for those conversations to happen.
Peers even.
Around your peers, with a teacher you've known a little bit, but not a lot. And yes, you need sleep. You should get sleep, and yes, you should, take care of your body and use, condoms and things like that. But they're not like in-depth conversations, and so then it falls on parents, and those are conversations that are hard to have, and you don't know what information your child's getting.
And if I bring it back to what Alexa said, neurodevelopment, what we're talking to our 5th grader about is really different than what we're talking to our 8th grader about, and then our 11th grader. And so, depending on where you live, what state you live in, what school district you live in, perhaps you are at a public school or you're at a religious school or you're at a private school, you're going to get a very different curriculum. And some of those topics are not going to be readdressed. They might have said, we covered basic female anatomy and the menstrual cycle in 5th grade, check, we're done. And that's a very different conversation with a 11th grader than it is with a 5th grader or with a college student. And so I think we need to remember that we need to continue having the conversations. I get this call a lot from my friends. Okay, I'm going to have the talk. Can you give me some pointers? And my number one pointer is, that's great. I am so happy you're going to talk to your child, but it's not the talk. It's the talks. It's plural. It's multiple. They need to be ongoing conversations, and they need to be ongoing conversations as your child stage of life changes. So many different factors. If they're mental development, maybe they're in a relationship, maybe they're moving out on their own, maybe they're traveling for the summer by themselves. Different things come up at different times. And it's scary, and I totally recognize that. And my husband would probably say he's thrilled that I'm not scared to talk about anything. It kind of comes with the nurse background. It's really hard to make me uncomfortable. But I recognize that that's not the same for everybody. So the advice that I also love to give is, you don't have to do it all in one sitting. Just have a 5-minute conversation. And you can set a timer, or you can tell your kid, I want to talk about this for 5 minutes, and I promise at the end of 5 minutes we'll be done. I love car ride conversations. Car rides are great. No one can escape. I also love no eye contact.
Walking
Right.
too.
I listened to a woman speak at our son's school this year, and she said, both of you sit on the couch, look straight forward. You don't have to look at each other. Set the timer. Be like, we're going to talk about this one topic for 5 minutes. Ask me all your questions. Okay. And admit sometimes, I think it's really important to admit to our kids that we are as uncomfortable as they are. Like, I know you're cringing, but like, it's really hard for me too. Like, I don't want to have this conversation. So it's okay. And then if you really don't want to have a conversation, then find trusted people who can, because I don't want anyone to feel shamed if it's too hard for them, as long as they feel like they find people who they do trust to talk to their kids.
That's such a good point. And Jerry, you could probably speak to this better than I, but especially from a learning perspective, when anybody feels like big emotions like shame or embarrassment, it's really hard to take in the information too.
Yeah, their mind goes blank. They're thinking about the ending of it.
Totally. So if you're just one and done, like the amount of information that they might have actually held on to might be so minimal. So that this open dialogue, I think, is so important, not just about sexual or like physical health, but just in general about anything in life, that opportunity to build trust and open communication, I think is really the entryway and the on-ramp to be able to be supportive in situations where things might come up and might feel uncomfortable or unsafe, to be able to navigate that.
For sure. So I'd like to hear from your perspective on like some topics and some ideas that maybe are misunderstood or things that are important to talk about. Before we do, there's a context here that's important, because in therapy, I kind of hear a lot of different things. And one of which over the past 10, 15 years with the internet, that's an important context about talking about things like sexual health is, and this goes back to like even 10 years ago. I remember working with a young person. It was like, there's like cartoons on YouTube when the kid is like 10, and it turns into pornography without anybody realizing what it's going to turn into. And these kids get exposed to something they've no idea. It kind of freaks them out, but then they get curious about it and they keep watching it, and there's like an addictive quality to it. And so like the context is so important about these conversations, I imagine too, because the background information or the background exposure is so important about, you know, how it's talked about, or maybe the kid doesn't even know how to bring that type of thing up because it shapes how they think about these topics as they get older because of, you know, earlier experiences. And that's interesting to think about.
Yeah, there's the amount of exposure for the younger generation that we did not grow up with it's completely different. Like we didn't have that experience. There wasn't the internet that we were going on YouTube to watch a video and then it turned to something else. So now we as adults are learning that's happening to our kids. We have to, as adults, figure out how to have that conversation with our children, even though that it wasn't an experience that we lived, and talk about like, this might come up. You might see this, like let's talk about that. Or have you ever, like, has that ever happened to you? But it's things that like as adults, we are learning kind of as we go also, because we didn't live that. Like that wasn't our experience.
I'm picturing like the movie of Sandlot, and they have like the dirty magazines that they like sneak every once in a while.
Right.
And now it's like you have exposure and access all the time as a young person if you have any kind of digital technology.
Much more extreme.
Much more extreme. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the statistics are absolutely staggering. With I don't want to be misquoted. I don't remember the exact statistics, but the number of like fourth graders who have already been exposed to some sort of pornography situation online is staggering and would shock almost every parent. And I think not only, as Johanna said, we're learning and navigating this as adults who never sort of experienced it. I think that there's a huge knowledge gap with so many parents that this is even happening. And that is not a criticism to parents. I think there is so much overload on parenting right now in terms of education and social emotional health and all of these topics that are so important. That if you actually are, doing all of that and working and raising your family and trying to find a little bit of space for yourself too, how do you even know that is out there? And so I think that's also an enormous challenge for society and for parents right now. I come from a background of healthcare. I have a master's degree in nursing, and I am still not even aware of some of these things. I'm still learning. I'm going back and taking more sexual health education courses as I'm educating kids to learn about these knowledge gaps that I certainly didn't learn about in my master's degree program in nursing school.
And there's new terms that are popping up every day that
constantly.
Kids are using that like aren't necessarily familiar to even them, but especially not to us as adults.
Yeah, and it's why young people need trusted adults also, because I have had this conversation with Abby before where if she's going into a medical appointment, she's sort of like knowing what is supposed to happen and knowing what to expect, and not every question that they should ask, but she has the background of like, okay, this is what that appointment should look like, but I don't necessarily have that. So I might leave an appointment and think like, okay, I think it went okay. And she'll say to me, but did they ask you X, Y, and Z? And I'll say no, but I didn't know that they should have asked, or I don't have that knowledge. And the reverse for like in an education world where you guys have that knowledge, and that's a lot on a parent to know all that, which is why there are people turn to you at Jerry as a resource for emotional health and well-being and education. Like I can't do the things that you do. Like that's your expertise. You know so much more about it, but the kids are getting all of that information at them.
I was actually at an appointment in the spring for my kids' well visit check. And my son was like a standard teenage boy. Everything was fine. And I did mention before I left the room, because I do leave the room for my children's exams, but for the first 5 minutes I was there, and I did say, well, sometimes you have trouble falling asleep. And the trigger response from the pediatrician was, well, have you tried melatonin? Which, of course, because I have a sleep consultant for a sister, my radar went up, and I was thinking, wow, that was the first question. But again,
no, look at all the behaviors. What else is happening? You don't just give melatonin right away.
And if I didn't have a background as a healthcare provider, I wouldn't think, oh, we should also ask about like their mental health and their stress, and are they thinking about what's been going on in this year that could be, or screen time, et cetera. List the long things that can affect sleep. And so, again, this is not anything against the pediatricians. I think they are asked to do an enormous amount of work and cover an enormous amount of topics in a 15-minute well visit. And on top of that, it's impossible.
It's impossible.
And
It's
on top of
truly
that, you
impossible.
have, if you have a pretty well-adapted, healthy child without a lot of, challenges, maybe they see that doctor once or twice a year, a well visit check and a strep check. They're not also having the time to really build a relationship with a person that they feel that they really trust them, and that want to come to them with those questions.
Right. Trust is important.
Yeah, it's really important.
And it's not their fault, because they don't, like we said, they have this short window of time and more patients to see.
Wait, so I said in the introduction that I don't want to provide a checklist, but if you were going in, as you do, with your child to a wellness visit, what are some things that parents might want to keep front of mind to either set the tone or plant the seeds before they do give their child space?
I think that when you have a well visit appointment, especially as you have a child who's an adolescent and they're getting ready a year or two away from going to college, and they're going to be on their own and having to think about, how do I go to appointments on their own, having a conversation beforehand with your child about, do you have any questions? They'll probably look at you and say no, but have you thought about anything? Are you concerned about, and it could be sleep, it could be their growth, it could be their menstrual cycles, it could be acne, anything that feels maybe that it's bothering some to them, and give them a little bit of ownership. I think that it's important that we let our kids lead these discussions and think about it. When they're under 18, I also do feel strongly that parents should be allowed to be in the room for a part of the visit. Parents have questions. Sometimes those are the same questions that the kids have, but we need to give our kids space and ownership to start thinking for themselves about what is concerning to them, not what's concerning mom. Right? Mom's agenda and kids' agenda might be really different. So what is it that you want to talk about? And give them the autonomy and the space to know that they can ask the questions, and hopefully also give them the confidence to say, and if you don't get the answer you want, or you don't understand it, ask again. It's okay. Or stop and say, can I write this down? We need to give them the tools to take care of themselves, because we're not always going to be there. And that's what we want. That's the goal of parenthood, right? Is to launch them to being successful human beings in all ways that mean success. And in my definition right now, I'm talking about in their physical and mental health.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it back to you and say these are conversations we shouldn't just have right before a well visit, right? If your kid is starting to say, like, I'm feeling tired, I feel like I'm lacking focus, we can zoom out and look at the bigger picture and be like, how are you sleeping? How are you feeling connected to your friends or to us? Like, how are you eating? Are you hydrating? These are the questions that I ask, especially younger people, so they develop this awareness to start checking in with themselves, as you're saying, Abby.
And that's
because
what
it's
we
so
want
important.
them to do. We want them to
100%.
continue to check in with themselves, because we're not, I don't want to ask that question every day, but I also know that my kids need to be independent, and they need to think, like, when they are not in my home and they feel exhausted at the end of the day, like, well, what happened yesterday? What did I do? What did I not eat? What do I need to change today? But they have to be able to start doing it on their own, because we can't feed it to them all the time.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to share that it's sometimes natural to not always feel our best, right? Or to be nervous about something, or not have the words to communicate what you need to ask or what you really need. As adults, it's even difficult to ask for what we need or even know what we need. So these are conversations that I think are so important to start now. And if you can have these tougher conversations in more neutral environments, whether it's a car ride or a walk, again, it helps for when situations get a little more tense, or maybe averse, that we can have these moments to draw upon to help you feel comfortable getting what you need.
What are some topics and information that you think is important? That's, par for the course for these types of conversations. What comes up? Because when we were doing the webinar, there's some things that you had mentioned, like some specific things that I was like, wow, yeah, that's pretty important. I didn't totally think like that's a thing to emphasize or to...
I would say in terms of kids who are leaving for whatever reason, they're no longer going to be under our roof. They need to think about their mental health and wellness. And as a sleep consultant, sleep is like a huge part of that. I know we talk about moving our bodies, we talk about eating healthy, but sleep is a huge component of wellness. And so you're going to be in a brand new sleep environment when you're wherever you are, leaving your home and being somewhere else. And you need to make sure that that space is conducive for sleep. So like small things, we spoke about this, but like using an eye mask, because you're going to be sharing a room and your roommate or roommates might be working later than you or coming home later than you, or you might be coming home later than them. And you want to protect your sleep and think about, okay, well, I have to get up tomorrow at 9 a.m. to get to my 10 a.m. class. Well, I want to get like 9 hours of sleep. I need to kind of work backwards and think about that. So setting up a sleep environment and actually, this goes to Alexis, but like executive functioning with planning. You have to be a planner and think, I have to kind of stop what I'm doing and have a 15-minute wind down, even if it's listening to music and nothing else. Or some people just read, or even if it's yoga or stretching or whatever it is, or just kind of washing your face and getting ready for bed, 15 minutes of just like my time before you get in bed to go to sleep, and pay attention to what time that is. Because if it led you to 6 hours of sleep, you're not going to feel great the next day. And it's actually going to impact the rest of the day. It's going to impact your ability to focus in your classroom and do your assignments and, not panic when you get a syllabus, because anytime we don't sleep enough, we get information and it's hard to process that information. So
I remember in the webinar you talking about how your brain refiles at night when you sleep, and that has stuck with me. Yeah. And I would love you to share that with the greater community.
When you sleep, your brain actually saves, stores, files information that you learned in the day. So you actually need sleep to maintain all the information that you learned so that you can retrieve it the next day. So our sleep is like, I tell like my older kids, it's like saving a video game. You hit save and actually it saves and stores it for the next day. So you didn't lose your game, you didn't lose all the points you had, but actually your sleep is saving all the information and it files it so you can pull it out later when you need to retrieve it. So when you are studying and learning and, reading an enormous amount of reading for a class, but the next day you're expected to then discuss it in a group or be able to, be called on and by a professor, you can actually pull that information out, because if you don't sleep, you're not storing that information as well and you're not organizing it. And I actually like visualize filing cabinets in my brain, because that's how I'm like a, visual like that. And it really does. I feel like they're getting put in files and then hitting save while we sleep. So the sleep is really important for that aspect in order to pull that information the next day.
So let's talk about the short-term and long-term that Alexis often talks about with planning. So in my experience, people in college, individuals, they want to have fun.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
like, it's an opportunity to kind of like always have opportunities to have fun, even if it's like 12 at night, 2 a.m., right? And they're like, oh, we're just going to hang out. Like, this is so amazing. Like, I have the freedom to do it. And so in terms of thinking short-term and long-term, sleep also helps us to emotionally regulate.
Absolutely.
So if we get adequate sleep, our emotions are more regulated. So it's almost like you can have fun at 2 a.m. at the expense of the next day not feeling emotionally regulated.
Absolutely.
And it's important to kind of think about short-term, long-term.
And when you're in a college environment, there's constant people around you. Like you're sharing a room, or you're in a class, or you're walking across campus, or you're eating in a dining hall. Like it's not often that you're on your own. And if your emotional regularity is not kind of as strong as it should be, it's difficult to have social engagements with other people and relationships and connections. And so, yes, staying up until 2 a.m. might be fun in the moment. And we all went to college and we all did that. And that's going to happen to our kids when they go to college. Yeah. But the next day, it's harder to engage with people. It's harder to read social cues. It's harder to understand, people don't always think about this, but like to notice if somebody else isn't having a great day and to check in on them. Like it's harder to pick that up when you're exhausted and you didn't sleep the night before. So it's also hard to catch up on sleep. But I know we spoke about this a little bit in the webinar, you can't really catch up on sleep. So college students stay up late and then they sleep in late on the weekends. But back on Monday, when you have to wake up at 8 a.m., it's sort of a jet lag effect. Your whole body's clock has shifted from that weekend schedule. And you feel pretty bad on Monday morning when you wake up because your body had gotten used to waking at 11 or 12 or 1 in the afternoon. And you've now cut chunks of sleep off, hours off, and you're waking up at 8 to get to a class, but you're actually not catching up on that sleep. You've just shifted your whole schedule. So your whole body's schedule has shifted and then you're shifting it back and you're doing that it's like flying East Coast to West Coast every single weekend.
Wow.
And just to be clear, the solution to that is actually not to sleep in, but to wake up consistently,
Yes.
even if it's like 8 a.m.
Yeah.
and just be miserable the whole day. But
Yeah.
at least you'll fall asleep at a normal time
Absolutely.
that night and then wake up at the normal time. So
Yes.
it's consistent.
Yes. And I use the word consistent with my families all the time. I mean, it doesn't matter which sleep training method you choose. It doesn't matter how old your kid is. Consistency is one of the most important things when you want to make any change in life and with sleep in general, in this case. But yes, you actually have to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day to get the adequate amount of sleep.
And it helps my Whoop score. My
And it
Whoop,
helps,
my Whoop
yeah.
ages dramatically decrease.
Exactly.
For my sleep
Exactly.
consistency.
It really does.
I'm so
And
young.
I tell, well, and like, exactly. I tell people also, one tool is, have your kids set their own alarms in the morning when they're home, because they're going to go off to college and need to set their own alarms to get up.
Please.
But setting an alarm for bedtime is actually just as important as setting an alarm for in the morning, because it just says to your brain, like, okay, that alarm went off. I actually want to stop what I'm doing.
And cortisol too, right? If you're consistent
Absolutely.
with your sleep, cortisol levels are consistent,
Yeah.
which is important for being ready to wake up at,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
just regulating your body's
Yep.
functioning.
Yeah, your cortisol levels move with the light and the darkness, and so we want to make sure you're similar each day, consistent.
I have like 3 questions, but I'm going to ask the $1 million question that the audience is probably wondering that I know doesn't have one answer. How much sleep should you get?
Every single person
Give us the
asks me
exact
that.
number.
I know. I had to ask.
So college students kind of get lumped into the adult area, which I don't love because a lot of them are 18.
Yeah.
So they say like 7 to 9 hours for adults, but actually for college students, there's more of a push for like 9 to 10 hours.
Can we
Really?
rewind to think about like teenagers, because the number is way different than most people think.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean, people, I don't expect teenagers to get 12 hours of sleep. Although when they sleep in on the weekends, that happens. But like I just said, that's not catching up. That doesn't make up for the 6 hours
Yeah.
that you got on Thursday night. So, I mean, if you can aim to get 8 to 9 hours a night, but I prefer like 10 and more, but
Really?
it's not possible with their schedules. It really isn't. These kids have a lot of work. They have a lot of things going on. They're doing homework late into the night, and they have to wake up early for school. Like high
I
school
think they're
schedules.
busier than adults.
They are.
Agreed,
They
yeah.
are. And adults, we perpetuate it because we schedule those things. But high school is not designed for sleep. Kids have to get up at 6 a.m. to get to school on time, to get a bus, to get to school. It's completely backwards. Like elementary school students
Yeah.
start their day later, and it should be reversed. Elementary school students should actually have an earlier start time, and high schoolers should have a
Oh.
late start time.
100%.
There are movements across the country to shift it, but it's difficult because of after school sports and jobs and things that they actually want to end the day, but high schoolers should start later because they
Definitely.
do need that sleep. And it's hard to get when you have to be up at 6 a.m. or earlier to get to school. Some start at 7. Like, my kid's school starts at 8, which is on the later side. But your kids start at 8 and they live further away. So that means they're up early to get out the door.
I love what Jerry said about short-term, long-term, because especially with adolescents and young adults, it's very difficult for them to see the long-term impact of their present moment decisions.
Absolutely.
So this is leading back to Abby, but before we do, can you share, like there's some like these things aren't good for your sleep, we shouldn't do them, but can you just explicitly share like some of the things that really are the greatest impact on sleep and just overall rest in general? Because I even find that like being involved in so many things, it's hard to rest.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of adults can connect with that idea too.
Yeah, there's so many answers to this, but one is light and dark. Darkness absolutely helps us get better sleep. It sends a signal to our brain that it's time to sleep. It helps set our circadian rhythm, which is our internal clock that dictates sleep and wake. So having a very dark sleep environment is hugely important. And think about morning too, because when the sun rises and the sun comes in, and it's lovely to have big windows, but it will wake you up. And you want exposure to light when you wake up, but you don't want it to wake you before you're ready. So darkness.
Can I ask you a question about that? It's almost like connecting to the rhythm of nature.
It absolutely.
And so like, I'm going to answer your question too, Lex. I feel like kids are so stressed nowadays and they're worried about literally everything and like things that you can't even, like anything you can think of, they're worried about. And so I feel like that gets in the way of the natural ending of the day, because it's like you've been on edge the whole day. You feel like something bad is always going to happen or something bad has happened. And there's no natural wind down, like almost like a rhythm of the day.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's important to learn how to retrain yourself to remind yourself that it's almost like unplugging from the matrix and being like, wait, everything's okay. Nothing bad is happening. Like I'm safe. Like I'm here in my bed.
Yep.
Like all that panic and those alarms going off of me, like they're false alarms. There's really not, unless there really are bad things happening that you got to address. But I think.
Can we highlight that? What's a good mantra for people to feel safe? Because I do this for myself too. And I'm sure you would advise your patients to do the same, to remind themselves like, I am safe.
Yep.
I'm okay.
I mean, just put your hand on your heart or your stomach or your belly and just ground yourself in your body and remind yourself, like, look around, be mindful, be present. You have a transitional object, whatever it is, like that you feel comfortable with, or a song or something. Talk to someone that you feel comfortable with, or whatever it is that grounds you, to remind yourself, like, this is the natural rhythm of the day. Everything's okay. We're so conditioned to be afraid and angry and upset about everything all the time that it's so important to just let the natural cycle of the day just happen naturally.
I'm going to add one other strategy. I often offer to take a shower at the end of the day, to literally say to yourself, I'm washing the day away, so that you can transition into rest.
Yeah. When I work with some of my older clients, I have them, if they want to, like, I never want to put pressures on them, but if they want to journal before bed, even for my like non-writing, like if they want to color or put something in a journal. And I always say, like, it doesn't have to be things that you're worried about or upset about. It can be about anything. And you're just, emptying everything in your head before you go to bed.
Yeah.
So it's
a lot
like
of
a
great
brain
research on that
dump,
too.
and it's just like, get it out of your head before you go to bed.
Nice.
And I'll say, like, it doesn't have to be what you're worried about. It just can be anything. And then they'll start, even if they color about something else that they love, that is in their head when they're going to sleep, and not something else.
Love it.
Gratitude journal, like all these little things are so helpful. So
but anyway, darkness,
back to the things that are impactful.
Yeah. But to piggyback on that, a wind down routine is really important. Whether you're putting your 2-year-old to bed or whether you're a college student, just giving yourself 10 to 15 minutes of like, I'm going to plug my phone in. I'm not telling, I know they're on screens. I'm not saying obviously an hour before bed. Yes, but like, that's not realistic. So just give yourself like 10 to 15 minutes of, I'm just focusing on getting myself ready for bed, calming down, turning the lights off, putting my sleep mask on. Silly things in college is also like clean sheets help you sleep, like actually wash your sheets, because the allergens can make you not feel good. And when you don't feel good, you actually aren't going to sleep that well. So
find those free washers in the building.
Use them, like, you wash your sheets.
They're becoming more and more common. I just finished a lot of college tours, and they are becoming more common, those free washing machines.
Yeah, but use them.
It goes back to planning, right?
Yeah,
like having a week to reset your space is so important, because like I always say, your space, your physical space sometimes dictates how you're feeling on the inside. So if there's stuff around, if it's dirty, if there are allergens, it can really impact so much of everything. Another
Look
big
good,
question.
feel good, Alexis, right?
There you
Look
go.
good, feel good.
There
If
you
your
go.
space looks good and you feel good, it's really helpful.
Totally.
It's a good mantra.
So real quick question, especially for college students, should you be doing schoolwork in bed?
Oh, no. Please use your bed for just a few things. And it would be both what Abby and I both talk about. It's really for sleep and intimacy.
Yeah.
Beds are for really just, and it's hard in a dorm room because there's sometimes not another space.
Correct.
But maybe you can fit a beanbag chair in your room, or maybe you can like actually sit the other direction on your bed and prop up some pillows just so you're not like tucked into bed. your brain is trained. Like we want our brain to be trained that when I get into bed and pull up the covers, I'm actually going to go to sleep.
It triggers you to feel, it's sleep time.
Yeah. So try to find places, and I know Alexis has spoken about this too, whether it's a coffee shop or a library, or mix it up. Like it doesn't have to be the same location all the time, but try not to do it in bed because it really, you want that space for sleep.
I often am reminding people that like our brains are not as smart as we think they are. Like we train them based on our behaviors and our habits to associate different things. So if you're in your bed doing work all the time, our brains are going to associate bed with like work and being on versus what it's really intended to be is restful and being able to wind down and be comfortable. Okay, so all of this is pivoting us back to Abby because
that connection was so great.
it was a really good one, thinking about sleep and how beds are really just for two things, but also thinking about long-term and short-term impacts of things. Because if you aren't resting, if you aren't caring for your body, you don't often make good decisions.
Absolutely.
And it can impact the vulnerabilities for everybody across the lifespan. But I wonder if you can share a little bit about what you tend to see, because you've seen all sides of things.
I see a lot.
Yeah.
I always find this transition, and I found it harder in the webinar too. I'm like, I feel like Joanna's giving this really good, like helpful information, and mine starts to feel really scary. And my goal is that I don't want to scare people because I talk about things that are scary, like sexual assault and sexually transmitted infections and, you know, drugs and alcohol. And those things are really scary, but I want to come at it from a perspective where we're not scaring kids, and I really don't want to use anything that involves shame or
the ambulance is going by as you're saying. Don't be scared.
I know, don't be scared.
It's about education.
It's a trigger.
Teaching people.
Yeah, I don't want people to feel shame because things will happen and things do happen. And so I think we need to find a good balance where we're educating our kids about all things related to sexual health so they can make good decisions. And then also let them know that if something bad or scary does come up, if there is an instance that there is sexual assault, if there is an instance where like, I don't know, you maybe something doesn't feel right and you're concerned that you have an infection, that you don't feel the shame to not get help. And so I think it's really important that we hold both of those things when we're in our sort of mindset when we're talking to kids. So, you know, I've seen a lot in my last sort of 8 to 10 years as a sexual health nurse examiner. I take care of all genders, all gender identities, everyone. Unfortunately, it does not, you know, sexual assault occurs across the lifespan and across all genders. But one of the sort of reoccurring themes I've seen amongst college kids is a situation where kids are out and they're partying and they're drinking, and then there's this period where they don't remember. They sort of wake up and they're in a compromised situation. And perhaps that's a situation where maybe somebody put something in their drink, like a roofie or something that would make them have that amnesia. Sometimes it's actually just kids drinking too much, and similar to, you know, you've trained your brain that like your bed is where you're going to sleep. I think that sometimes when kids finally like sit down, they stop dancing, whether it's on a couch or in the back of an Uber or wherever, there's this sort of relaxation that takes over, and they also just pass out and kind of become in a compromised situation. And so if we think back to sleep and making good decisions, I think that we need to educate our kids that we understand, you know, you're going to go to college, there are going to be parties, there are going to be fun times, but thinking about how can I also stay in control and make good decisions? Or if I see that my friend is not in a good situation, how do I encourage them to sort of walk away or to go home? And I had a college student ask me the other day, like, well, how do you know when a situation is uncomfortable? And I said to her, the minute it feels uncomfortable to you, it doesn't matter what the situation is. If somebody is just holding your hand and that feels uncomfortable, then that's an uncomfortable situation. If you just get a vibe like, this party doesn't feel like it's going in the direction I want it to go anymore, I think it's really important for them to have the tools to say, okay, I'm going to leave. So when it comes to sexual health, I want kids to be aware of, first of all, I want them to know that sex is supposed to be pleasurable. It is something that is important. And I think one of the conversations that is lacking these days is we talk a lot about consent. And I think that it's coming more from a litigious background than a consent to make sure that both people are just feeling safe, that they trust the person they're with, that they are both enjoying the situation.
Like it's not just a physical experience; it's an emotional.
It's an emotional experience.
Someone once said that to me. I said, "This is beautifully said."
I totally agree, and I think these are not. This is not my these are my words. Someone mentioned once at an educational talk that I was at. Our children are on Snap or text or social media so much that there actually is so much social anxiety amongst them to communicate in real time, face to face with another human being, and that is something that maybe our generation did do a little better because we didn't have a choice, right? We had to, you wanted to ask someone out, you kind of had to look them in the face or maybe make a phone call or pass a note. But you couldn't just send them a snap and send an emoji back, right? Like you had to.
Even now our kids use the phrase, and I don't mean our kids, like kids in general use the phrase talking. Like, I talked to her. Yeah. But that actually doesn't mean they were talking.
Right.
They were snapping, texting, and I'm like, oh, that you did not have a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah. So can I ask you a question then real quick? So if we're saying intimacy should be an emotional in addition to a physical experience, are you saying because kids are so socially anxious, which I 100% agree they are socially anxious, that it almost precludes it from becoming a more emotional, safe, comfortable experience because there is that disconnect of the emotional piece because they're so socially anxious to connect and to find that.
100%. And I try to remind teens that if you are going to have this really intimate experience with another human being, you should be able to talk to them. You should be able to say things that you want to do, that you don't want to do, that you trust. You should be able to ask them to use a condom. You should be able to talk about things like pregnancy prevention and STI prevention. And if you can't have those conversations with that person, is that the right person to be having this very intimate moment with? Because it's just as much physical as it is emotional. It's probably more so emotional if we think about sort of all the thoughts that go in before and afterwards. It's a very vulnerable time. And so I think giving our kids the tools to educate them about all forms of safe sex, forms of protecting them from pregnancy, ways to protect them from infections, ways to protect them from assault. So then when they're in the moment, when they're actually with that person, they have all that stuff and that doesn't feel scary because they're like, oh, I can talk about those things. And then maybe the emotional stuff is harder for them to talk about, but they at least have that knowledge base of these are the things that I know that are going to keep me safe. And I want to have that front of mind too.
I don't know if this is accurate, but in the media, there's reporting that younger people are not having as much physical intimacy. And I'm glad you brought up this idea of social anxiety, because I think that a lot of it is impacting, right? Maybe it's a lack of knowledge and understanding of what like safe sex actually is and looks like in an emotionally safe environment. And also this fear of like not even engaging. So this is also why I think your work is so important for people to understand their bodies, their minds, their hearts, to be able to even make that decision.
Yeah, and I think for kids going to college, it's the first time that they're going to be with such a diverse group of people from different educational backgrounds, religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. They're going to all come into it with really different knowledge bases. And so that's also really important. I think a lot of kids are going to have come to college with very little, sexual experience. And I think that might be the one thing that's kind of constant in terms of kids having the social anxiety, but the education they've gotten and from where they've gotten it is going to vary so much based on all of those other factors. And I think that that's what's really important. I have talked to kids who have maybe more experience, but come from schools that are very strict. And so they've gotten their information from other people. And then vice versa, kids who are not as, intimate, but they have learned more based on their backgrounds. And so we're getting this melting pot of kids coming in, and it's really scary because I'm forgetting the term right now, and it drives me crazy that I'm forgetting, but there is a term of why sort of sexual assaults are so high in that first semester of college. And it's all of these things we've touched upon: the vulnerability, the education, the making good decisions, the
want to have a lot of fun.
The want to have fun.
The want this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Not missing out.
The expectation.
Right.
Expectation.
Yeah, the fantasy of what it should be.
Yeah.
And substance use too. And
Absolutely.
I feel like the substances goes hand in hand with the anxiety. I feel like kids are using substances a lot nowadays. all types of substances because of that anxiety. And then it kind of feeds into this cycle of what we're talking about. It can make people more vulnerable to making decisions that could be unhealthy for them on both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What they think might be, let me have a drink or two to sort of calm the nerves, and then it very quickly escalates way past that, and then they aren't in a position where they can make safe choices.
For both sides of it, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I don't know if I should mention this, but I went to a Jesuit undergraduate college and graduate work too. And there was a very distinct difference in behaviors for those who went to parochial schools going into the college versus those who weren't, that a lot of times they were so, I don't know, protected perhaps from these conversations that when they got into college, they experimented way more than some of their peers. So it's interesting just to double down on the
Good
idea
point.
of like being educated properly and being open to these conversations. And obviously, like, you know, religion and values come into play for sure. But I think the expectation needs to be, these are things that kids are exposed to, whether we like it or not, whether we agree or not, whether they're engaging or not, they're exposed to it either from their friends or when they go to college from peers, and these different conversations that come up. I mean, for goodness sakes, I had a conversation with a 13-year-old's mom about the show that we were talking about on the webinar a few weeks ago, because it's, you know, talking about college relationships. And the men characters were a little bit more honest about this consensual sexual relationship
And trust. They talked so much about trust. I saved that clip
for
an educational piece.
But I will say two things. One is, you know, a young person, like a teenager, might be watching the same kind of visual exploration of relationships as somebody a little bit older and not really knowing what's happening and maybe not even cueing into what's happening. So as an adult in a young person's life, it's important not to say, oh, but did you notice this? Or do you know what this means? Because a lot of times the younger people, and Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes the younger people don't actually understand the gravity of what's happening. So it's tricky to like plant those seeds without them noticing. So it's a careful navigation of the conversation.
And it goes back to what we were talking about before of having multiple conversations through their developmental time. You know, I heard once that, you know, consent with, you know, when you're talking in elementary school is literally talking about, well, how did you feel if someone just took that French fry off your plate? Like, that's not okay.
Such a great
That's
example.
an easy way to talk about consent when they're young. And then obviously as they get older and they're more developmentally mature and the stakes are higher, you build on that. It's a building block.
Yes.
Just like, you
That's
know,
such a
you
good
learn your
point.
math
Such
facts
a great
first
point.
and you move up to calculus. Like, you've
Yes.
got to start with very basic things and move up in terms of your conversations and not, I think the word consent is used in an amazing way and in a detrimental way. I think it's great that we are talking about it. I think it's great that my kids are like, hey, Mom, did you have consent to do that? And I think that's awesome. I also think that it's getting thrown around a little too lightly. And what does it truly mean? And it can mean so many different things in so many different spaces. It's not just about sex.
Right.
It's about
anything that feels uncomfortable.
And even, you know, if we go back to sleeping and thinking about being in your dorm room and consent can be asking your roommate, hey, like, I think my boyfriend might want to sleep over tonight. Is that okay with you? That's asking consent from your roommate. And your roommate might say,
Such a
no,
great example.
I'm not comfortable.
Right,
Even
right.
if the person who's asking is like, we were studying, we're just falling asleep, like nothing is going to happen sexually. Well, maybe the other roommate is like, no, I can't sleep with other people in the room. That makes me uncomfortable. And so having that's another version of having a hard conversation, but it needs to happen.
Which, by the way, think about this. Like, at what other point in your life are you going to be in a room with someone where someone's having sex next to you?
Right.
Like, when you're a child, it doesn't happen. When you're out of college, it doesn't happen because you have your own room. If you have a roommate, maybe they're in a different room. But, like, it's just like, I don't think people realize because they've never had it's new to them. They think it's normal. But
Right. The conversations are important. I mean, it's a change. Abby just said, like, having these conversations, us with our children, roommate with a roommate, like, the conversations just have to keep happening, even if they're hard conversations. This is a kind of a change in topic, but even conversations of like, I typically go to bed by like 11 o'clock at night. You have this person that you're now rooming with who you've barely met. Maybe you met through a person, and they're like, I go to bed at 2 a.m. every day. Like, well, okay, like how are we going to make that work?
Totally.
But if you don't talk about it, it's not going to work. It's going to lead to like little problems to like a bigger problem. The conversations even if they're hard, you have to have them.
And Jerry and I can attest to the fact that like even just that discomfort in not being able to sleep because your roommate can't sleep, it impacts everything else. Like I see it all the time in my practice with like, you know, it's hard for them to focus, hard for them to show up. It's hard for them to feel good. They get overly anxious because they're holding on to something that could have been potentially rectified if you have a conversation.
Just say, I'm going to bed at 11. I'm going to, like, if you want to still study or you're out, can you just like come in quietly, or make sure like when you come in, you're, you know.
Yeah. So it's almost like kids have so much FOMO and so many expectations on how things should be that like there's no patience for like, okay, like maybe if this is not exactly how I wanted it now, it could be better later, or like, or even a conversation could, you know, be messy at first, but you can kind of work through it if you have a respect for each other.
I'm going to press pause because I want to go back to this idea of having a conversation, even with a child, and using maybe a movie or a show as a good gateway to having the conversation, because you're using somebody else, a character, as an example to have a conversation. And I really want to hear both of your opinions on this, because, you know, I think it's difficult to kind of just have these conversations organically, especially if you have younger kids or teenagers. And, you know, oftentimes parents don't feel comfortable with what they're watching, so they just let the kids watch it by themselves. And Steve Gross came on the podcast to talk about
From the Life is Good
Playmakers. And he talked about, you know, having a conversation with his kid about, you know, why do you like this song? Why do you like this music? Instead of saying, I don't like this, I'm uncomfortable. He got curious about like what actually was drawing him into the music that he was listening to that it seemed a little discordant to like his vibe. And he realized through having this conversation that it was way more than just the music or the lyrics. There was something else, you know, he was into the beat. He liked the rhythm. And I think the same goes for talking about sexual health or even physical health and sleep with kids. If you're watching a movie, to join them, even if it feels a little uncomfortable, because it might give you an opportunity to talk about it. I wonder if you can share some examples or ideas.
There's no shortage of teenage love and college love shows right now, and I know a lot of us in the room are watching them and enjoying them. And I know some
of us, not all of us.
Not all of us. I know some teens who are watching with their moms, and I applaud them, because how many times have we like had conversations with our friends where we're like thinking about that time, like, oh my God, I remember watching this movie, it was great, and then this scene happened, and oh my God, my parent was next to me, and it was so cringy, it was awful. And that's how our generation was, because our parents, you know, talked to us even less, because that was the time. So I think using media, whether it's a show, a movie, a song, even something if you see on social media, click video, are great ways to engage with kids and have conversations to, again, take it a little bit off of the, are you doing this? What are your friends doing? And make it sort of this more generalized conversation.
Takes the judgment out of it too, or the perceived
judgment, the shame, all of the stigma, all of those things. You know, we're talking about them, not you, and that can make conversations much easier.
Cool. Okay, I would like to hear you say some things about other topics that are about health that may come up as a college student. Yeah. Because you had mentioned a few in the webinar that I was like, good point. Like,
so, okay. So when I think about health overall and sort of just general wellness, we've covered that you need a dorm room that is sleep conducive, and that's like a non-negotiable. So when everyone's thinking about all the like decor that they want, I think that they need to think about their sleep decor, and then they need to think about their health decor. And so for health decor, I think it's really important to kind of recreate the family medicine cabinet, and not in a grand, crazy way, but basic things. So
there's no room for that.
Yeah, there's no room. But if you a small box that they can put under their bed, right? If you wake up in the morning and you have a headache, or your kid says, I have a headache, you go to your cabinet, you open it, and get them some Advil. They should have basic things. They should have Advil. They should have Tylenol. They should have a thermometer. How many times have I seen a patient that said, I have a temperature? What was the number? Oh, I don't know, I just felt bad. Well, a 99.9 is really different than 103. So it's really important that your kid has a thermometer that they can, and that they know how to use it. Because a lot of parents who have just been putting their thermometer in their kids' mouths up till 18. So they're not hard, and these are smart kids, but they should know how to use a thermometer.
So practice early.
Practice early. Some other basics are, maybe an allergy medicine, especially if your kids is used to having, frequent allergies, or again, if they're not changing their sheets a lot, as Johanna said, and there's a lot of allergens in their bed. And then first aid stuff. So some Band-Aids, some hydrocortisone, some Neosporin, some really basic things. Obviously, if they have a major gash in their hand, you're hoping that you have also talked to them about where to go if they need help. So student health is usually your first bet. If not, a local urgent care, but basic first aid. And then when it comes to sexual health, I think that every single child should have condoms in their room. And it doesn't mean that your kid is going to have sex, or that they are already having sex, or that the minute they get to college they're going to have sex. It's just preparedness. You never know when you're going to get a headache. Well, you never know when maybe you are going to fall in love, and maybe you are going to have that. And let's take away the barrier. One, condoms can be expensive, and we don't want kids to not buy them because they're expensive. Two, sure, there could be nervous, there could be shame. Again, if a child's adolescent's having sex, we would hope that they feel comfortable, but we understand that that's not always easy. I used to hand them out in the clinic all the time to patients and say, I don't care if you use them, give them to your friends, share them, just be a safe place, because not every kid's going to come to college with condoms. So maybe if your friend is talking to you and you can be like, oh, here, I have an extra condom, use this in case you need this. I think that people should have emergency contraception. And emergency contraception is a pill that is not an abortion pill.
Say that again.
Emergency contraception is not an abortion pill. It is just a pill you can take within 5 days of unprotected intercourse to help prevent pregnancy. And I think that everyone should have it. I don't think you should have a prescription for it. I think you should have it, the pill, in your med kit. So if something happens, you can take it immediately. It is more effective the sooner you take it. If you wait 5 days, it's not as effective as if you take it that morning. And again, you were probably really tired. You were probably, maybe drinking. You maybe made a decision that, you're stressed out. Why are we going to add more stress to these kids' lives and put them in a position where on a Sunday morning they're trying to find an open pharmacy? They should have it. Accidents happen. You could be the most responsible human being and have sex with a condom, and it can break. Nothing is 100%. So why would we not give our kid a seatbelt? It's an extra tool in their pouch, of medicine in case they need it.
Can you describe the name of that again so people?
So it's called emergency contraception. There's 2 different kinds. So Plan B is the one that you can buy over the counter. It's a medicine called levonorgestrel. It's safe. There's no side effects. There's no medical reason why somebody can't take it. Anyone can take it. The one little asterisk I would put is that it can be expensive over the counter. It can be up to $50, which I have lots of issues with, and I think it's ridiculous. So I personally, as a provider, prefer to give someone a prescription so they can purchase it over the counter, so their insurance company will pay for it, and then it'll maybe, in some states it's free, and in other states it's $5 to $10.
Wow.
And that's a significant savings.
Okay, good to know.
There's a second medicine called ulipristal acetate, which is known as Ella, which is another form. It's one pill. You take it one time. There's no side effects. You just can't use that method if you are on any hormonal birth control. So if you're taking the birth control pill, or you're using the birth control patch, or maybe you have a IUD that has some hormones in it, you can't take that kind. You can't take Ella. But they're great. They're great options. Back when we were in college, we used the emergency contraception plan was you just take basically a half a pack of birth control pills, which was terrible.
Oh my
People
God.
felt so sick. They were nauseous. They were vomiting. Well, and if you're vomiting your pill, then you're not actually getting the benefit from it. So these are really, really great options for people to have. And I don't want, again, there shouldn't be shame or stigma around it. It's kind of like if you by accident are cutting a bagel and you cut yourself, you're going to put a Band-Aid on. Well, if you're having sex and by accident the condom breaks, why should we punish you? You should have this option.
And it just prevents pregnancy
It
from
basically,
happening.
if ovulation has not occurred yet, it stops ovulation from occurring, or it kind of stalls things in place. And so it's not 100%. It's about 89% effective from preventing a sperm and egg to coming together and fertilizing.
Thanks for explaining.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think that, and this is one of the reasons why I started the Bare Facts, that little conversation we just had about contraception, or about emergency contraception, 3, 4, 5 minutes, Well, if I have 15 minutes to educate someone about birth control and birth control methods, I can't adequately do my job and feel like a responsible provider that I gave my patient all of the best information. There's so many great options out there, and there's no perfect option. I love the what would you do, or what's the best? There's no such best. Every individual is unique. What is best for you and for your body at this time in life, which may also be different in 5 years. But for us to really have a good conversation about that, you need the education and you need to be able to make your choice. And you can't do that if I am rapid fire throwing information to you in 5 to 7 minutes, and then you have to quick make a decision.
Well, that was 35% of the 15-minute conversation.
Yeah, there you go.
And speaking of which, when we did our webinar in June, we talked about how this could be like a 12-week series where we talk about all of this information. So I want to just, give you the opportunity to kind of share some last minute tips and ideas that you think would be helpful for both young people, their parents, caregivers, or even pediatricians who might be listening, that might be helpful to remind them.
I think that we need to look at each adolescent or college student as an individual person, and we need to figure out who their trusted providers are. And by provider, I mean, is that their parent? Is that a medical provider? Is that the mental health provider? Is that a sexual health provider? Is it an aunt? Is there someone who can have these conversations? And I don't want parents to feel bad if they feel like they can't cover every topic the way they need to really well. There's great resources in the communities. There are also great websites. There are great people on social media. It does take a little bit more work to find them, but we need to find the right ones for each individual. There is no, cookie cutter method on how to do this, especially because kids are going to be at different stages of development, emotionally, physically, sexually, at different points of their life. And so we need to figure out ways. I would also say, look at your kid for cues, figure out sort of what's going on around them and they want to talk about. And if you have a kid who doesn't talk, you have to take you and yourself out of their comfort zone and encourage them to talk and letting them know that they have spaces. So because something will happen at some point, whether it's sexually or with drugs and alcohol, at some point, something's going to happen. You want them to know that there are trusted people that I can talk to, that I'm not going to get in trouble, that are going to listen to me, and they're going to help me to navigate that. And there's lots of great resources on college campuses, whether it's the student health, the mental health, the Title IX office, which a lot of people don't know about, which is 100% for anyone who feels they have been a target of any kind of sexual assault. And that doesn't actually have to mean, rape as we think about rape. It could be that they feel uncomfortable with a professor in a classroom, that they feel uncomfortable with certain students. That office is available for them, and it's 100% confidential. And I want kids to know that there are resources for them.
Beautifully said.
I think conversation. I think that all the things we talked about today really go back to conversation with people that you trust. So the more you talk about things and the more we get things out there, even if they're uncomfortable, having the conversation just leads to more awareness. And when you have more awareness, you do make better decisions, or at least you have the information to weigh your decisions in terms of what I'm going to do here. I had that conversation with resources. So as I said at the beginning, there's a reason people go to you. There's a reason people turn to Jerry for support, to Alexis, to Abby, to me, because we have an expertise in an area. And so finding those people, because parents can't be experts on everything. We don't want them to feel like they need to be experts on everything, but there are many people out there that can support your parenting and support your child so that they can have these conversations, so that they're equipped with the tools that they need.
Beautifully said.
Nice. Can I do one PSI?
Yeah.
I just have to throw this in here because you had mentioned melatonin.
Yeah.
Or you did, Abby, right? And you mentioned it too, Johanna. And so melatonin it's not like candy. You don't just like pop a bunch of melatonin.
It's not regulated. It's not regulated in this country. So also the amount that it says on the packaging is not necessarily the amount that you're taking.
It's often much more.
And people accidentally overdose and give it to their children, and they don't mean to be giving their children too much, but they're going what the packaging says, but it's not regulated in a way that's safe. So I never recommend it. I'm not a medical provider. I always say, like, talk to your medical provider. There are instances, I work with children, autistic children or children with special needs or children who have severe ADHD, where there are times where it can play a role and be really helpful. But you just have to be careful with it. You can't just pop it. Right. You're actually not supposed to take it right before you go to bed.
Right. You're supposed to take it much earlier.
Yeah. It has to go into your system. So taking it right before you go to bed is not actually going to help you get a better night's sleep.
Seems like it would make sense, but it doesn't when you do that. Yeah. And then lastly, somewhat related, like THC gummies and marijuana gummies, right? That's not good for your quality of sleep.
Correct.
From what I understand.
Correct.
So
not
you may
good.
think it's going to knock you out, but the quality of sleep's not going to be
similar with alcohol, where you might have a drink or two and feel like, I'm gonna pass out and go to sleep. You often wake later in the night. You're not getting the restorative sleep that your body needs. So yeah, substances might help you fall asleep, but they don't allow you to get the restorative sleep.
And from the medical side, also, then you're getting up. You need to go to the bathroom. You go to the middle of the night. Then maybe you're a little bit tipsy. Maybe you trip. Maybe you fall. Like there's so many. It's a a cast spiral there that can, what you think is that quick pill, that quick fix. Like most things in life, there are no such things as a quick fix.
So for our last question, we're going to share how people can get in touch with you and some of the work you're doing on the website and also through social media. But what are some things that you're hopeful for in the future moving forward in the work that you're doing?
I hope this answers for both of us, but education is, and I don't just say that because I'm a teacher, but education is, we want to provide the education for people so they have the information and they feel supported and that they feel like we are people that they can come to for that education and for that support so they can feel better. I have families tell me all the time, like, you saved my marriage. You saved, because their child wasn't sleeping. Like, I didn't expect to go into that business doing that. That was not my goal, but providing the education to support families in a way that really impacts the whole family.
Yeah, I think my sister hit the nail on the head. I come from a family of educators, and I am the one medical provider, and I went into it because I really love sort of the medicine and science, but the majority of what I do is education. I educate people constantly, whether I am seeing them in my medical practice, when I'm seeing them in the hospital and taking care of them. There's so much that is education. I actually had a young adolescent a few weeks ago say to me, my boyfriend tried to tell me that birth control was bad, and I pulled up your website and I said, let's look at somebody who actually has an education and a background and knows what they're talking about and show you why it's not bad for me. And I loved it that I was a resource for her to share and explain why, but that she had a tool. And I think that we do, there's unfortunately so many voices coming at these kids. And there's a lot on social media that is trying to scare them or put in fear, or maybe people who even think that they're doing well, but they don't have the background and the knowledge. And so I want our kids to be educated by people who are educated and evidence-based medicine of why we're doing what we're doing. And then the other thing is that I want kids, families, adolescents to feel safe. And I want them to feel that they have trusted people that they can talk to so that they are safe.
We're so grateful for both of you and all that you do and for joining us here today.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us. We are
Thank you,
eternally
guys.
grateful to have both of you in our lives and with our children.
No. Thank you, siblings.
The dream team.
Thanks for tuning in to the ReidConnect-Ed podcast. Please remember that this is a podcast intended to educate and share ideas, but it is not a substitute for professional care that may be beneficial to you at different points of your life. If you are in need of support, please contact your primary care physician, local hospital, educational institution, or support staff at your place of employment to seek out referrals for what may be most helpful for you. Ideas shared here have been shaped by many years of training, incredible mentors, research, theory, evidence-based practices, and our work with individuals over the years, but is not intended to represent opinions of those we work with or who we are affiliated with. The ReidConnect-Ed podcast is hosted by siblings Alexis Reid and Dr. Gerald Reid. Original music is written and recorded by Gerald Reid. Recording was done by Cybersound Studios. If you want to follow along on this journey with us, the ReidConnect-Ed podcast will be releasing new episodes every 2 weeks each season. so please subscribe for updates and notifications. Feel free to also follow us on Instagram at ReidConnect-Ed Podcast. That's ReidConnect-Ed Podcast, and Twitter at ReidConnect-Ed. We are grateful for you joining us and look forward to future episodes. In the meanwhile, be curious, be open, and be well.